Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. A little different setup today. We got an early taping because TV's own Greg Cosell is kind enough to make some time for us here later this afternoon. He is going to be in the midst of taping something for what? What are we working on today, Greg? Can we disclose that to people?
I have to do an interview with someone who, wants to be an intern on my matchup show this year. So we're in the process of filling slots. So the only time he could do it was at the time we normally do our podcast. So,
Well, that would then take, the place of me trying to interview to be an intern on the matchup.
Right.
Perhaps we'll wait for next year's round of submissions. We are going to talk Houston Texans today because we've been previewing the AFC South. But quickly before we do, Greg, Christian McCaffrey did get a 2-year, $38 million extension from the San Francisco 49ers. It's $19 million on average, which does technically reset the running back market, but he's so much more than just, and even just to say just a running back almost denigrates the position, but he's such a weapon for them that it's well worth the cost of what they're paying on him.
Yeah, and obviously he is a running back, but because he's so gifted, he can do more things. He's formation diverse, and they use him that way. Since he is a running back, he's clearly the best back in the league, and he's on a team that his value to that team and to that style of offense just supersedes being a running back who takes a handoff, even though he's obviously really, really good at that. But it's so much more, as good as Brock Purdy has been since he became a starter 2 years ago in his rookie season. McCaffrey's really the foundation of that offense and kind of the glue of the way in which they play. So I'm not surprised by the signing. And again, the money becomes the money. We know the salary cap goes up. The whole idea of resetting the market, Buck, we always find interesting. That's what's being talked about now, of course, with Justin Jefferson as well. And we'll see how that plays out with, I guess, we're speaking now, Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, who kind of view themselves as ready for a new contract. So we'll see how that goes. Although I would argue that Jefferson is the best receiver in football. Some might say Tyreek Hill. It's funny. I was speaking to a good friend of mine who's very clued into the league and has spent a lot of time talking to coaches. And he had a conversation with a number of coaches and GMs recently about the top 5 receivers in the league. And the 4 names that immediately came up were Jefferson, Hill, Chase, and Adams. And then they kind of said, well, do you have to put CeeDee Lamb in that category? And they were sort of going back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Absolutely. So with that, there is a lot of interest in the Houston Texans this year offensively. Obviously, we talk about offensive skill position players. Last year, Greg, they went from worst to first in the AFC South from 2022 to 2023, and a huge deal of that to do, of course, with the second overall pick at quarterback, C.J. Stroud, in that Bobby Slowick offense. They were excellent throughout the course of the year, and Stroud was excellent, setting records as far as rookie production. How did you see him grow and develop throughout the course of the season?
I think one of the things that really stood out to me, Buck, and I think, maybe a lot of people don't think of it like this, but I, obviously watch a lot of tape and have talked to a lot of people over the years, is one of the things when rookie quarterbacks come into the league from college, and particularly with the hash marks being different, obviously they're wider in college and they're closer in the NFL. So the NFL game is played much more in the middle of the field. And a lot of quarterbacks struggle when they get to the NFL with making throws between the numbers or between the hashes, which is even tighter, obviously, because it just seems like there's more bodies out there, because in college with the hash mark so wide, the bodies are not really condensed into the middle of the field, because it seems, even though the field is the same width, that you have more space to cover in college because of the way the hash marks are aligned. Right. And I thought that Stroud was so good throwing between the numbers and between the hashes. And particularly when I looked, I went through some Stroud and I went through all of Nico Collins' targets. I think he had about 110 of them, and so many in-breaking routes. That was a real staple. Now, of course, that's Bobby Slowick, who came from the Niners. And we know that the Kyle Shanahan offense clearly foundationally features in-breaking routes. So Bobby Slowick, obviously coming from that tree, so to speak, did a lot of the same thing. But those are not easy throws in the NFL, and they're certainly not easy throws for rookie quarterbacks. And I thought Stroud showed a really high level, refined feel for timing, anticipation, the ability to throw in windows versus zone. That's really hard to do for a lot of young quarterbacks because those windows are not very big, and that requires timing and anticipation and precise ball placement.
Nico Collins, speaking of players getting extensions, did receive a
Yeah,
3-year extension this year from the Houston Texans. He's been a great player, an ascending player for them, and certainly was able to help CJ Stroud maximize what they were able to do last year. Tank Dell, of course, coming into his second year, he had the leg injury to end his rookie season, but was producing at a very high level. We'll see at what point he's ready throughout the course of training camp and up until the preseason and regular season, of course. And then they had Stephon Diggs, Greg, which we've talked about before when the trade was made. But just to give them such an array of weapons to allow
sure.
a new, basically to add additional layers to what they were already doing in that Slowick offense. And to, with Stephon Diggs, who's not at the peak of his powers anymore, but still, if he's a good soldier, and that's, remains to be seen, stands to be an effective piece for them to deploy.
Without question. And again, we don't know how all this is going to play out. I mean, there were times in Buffalo last year that Diggs did get on top of corners as a vertical route runner. I don't think that's his game as much now as it used to be. He's obviously a really refined, subtle, nuanced route runner, but I think he'll be much more of a short to intermediate route runner. He'll probably be used in motion quite a bit because Collins is essentially their big X receiver who line up a lot to the boundary side of the formation as the single receiver. So Diggs will probably be used more as a Z, a movement Z, move him around, put him in motion. Obviously, there's a lot of motion in that offense as well. Another remnant of the Shanahan school. But I think that, they have three quality receivers and they have a quality tight end. I do want to make one point which really stood out to me, and I think it's another thing that maybe people don't think about a lot, but it's so critical. In watching Stroud and Collins and seeing, 250, 300 dropbacks, what really stood out was how strong Laramie Tunsil is in one-on-one pass protection. And the reason that is so critical, Buck, is because every coach, particularly in the longer yardage situations, second and long, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, they want to send 5 receivers out. They want to send all 5 eligibles out. They don't want to have to get stuck keeping a back or a tight end either as a primary pass protector or even as a chipper, which limits the kinds of routes he can run. So when you watch the Texans and you see how good Tunsil is in one-on-one pass pro, that allows them to be really multiple and diverse with what they can do with their route concepts, particularly on the critical third downs.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, Greg. Must be nice to have a left tackle that can win one-on-one from time to
Oh, you
time.
had to bring it to the Titans, didn't you, Buck? Come
An
on.
occasional
Come
shot just to
on.
remind him, though. J.C. Latham's making nice progress, and Bill Callahan certainly seems to have his handful. You just got to remind people how bad it's been so that they can appreciate what they might have here in the near future. On the defensive side of the ball, Greg, and we'll keep it kind of tight today just because of a little bit of a tighter window for us to record. D'Amico Ryans had a productive defense last year with a defense that didn't necessarily have the most horsepower in the NFL, is just a diplomatic way to put it. Now they have Danielle Hunter. They add Danico Autry and Azeez Al-Shaair from the Tennessee Titans. They have
Yeah.
secondary that they've grown organically throughout the course of the draft process and previous coaching staffs that D'Amico Ryans has found ways to use. He seems to be building something special there in Houston collectively as a team, but the defense figures to have a lot more teeth in a division that has some young, up-and-coming quarterback prospects across the board that are going to be a handful, one would imagine.
Yeah, I think the best way to talk about their defense is not so much personnel, although it has improved. A lot of people, and you certainly know this, and Titans fans know it. We know about Danielle Hunter, but Danico Autry was a really important signing. He's been a really good player who can line up both at D end and at D tackle. For them, he'll be probably almost exclusively a D tackle with Danielle Hunter there and Will Anderson there. But he can do a lot of things. I believe Christian Harris is on his way to being a really impactful linebacker. Um, They obviously now have Jeffrey Okudah, who hasn't quite worked out where he's been as a former, I believe, number 3 pick.
Mhm.
But he'll line up opposite Derek Stingley, who's really, really good. And they did draft 2 defensive backs in the draft in the 2nd and 3rd round, so they clearly felt they needed to do that. But I think the point I wanted to really make was when you watch a DeMeco Ryans defense, here's what you see. They play on normal down and distance situations, Buck. They're a predominant zone defense. They'll play cover 3, they'll play cover 4, but they play it at such a high level that the players play with incredible discipline and speed. So even though these are not necessarily difficult defenses in the sense that people don't know how to attack them, of course teams know how to attack cover 3 and cover 4, but they play them at such a high level with so much speed, with the players understanding the gray areas, the conflict areas based on routes. They just play it at a high level. But then what really separates DeMeco Ryans is he is such a brilliant 3rd down and critical situation play caller. So in other words, it's almost like fastball changeup. 1st and 2nd down, you're going to get his fastball. You're going to get cover 3, cover 4, played really well. 3rd down and long, you're going to get the changeup, and you just don't know what it's going to be. He's so good at that, and he wins a lot in those situations. It's very difficult to prepare for.
I really that's the part of this that I enjoy, and even the untrained eye like mine and a lot of the audience. I think people can tell or at least enjoy how much more creative or see the creativity come out of defensive play callers on 3rd down, specifically when you see their base defense when they try to win on 1st and 2nd down, and then when you get the offense in an obvious passing situation or one where you can more comfortably deploy that pressure. It is so much fun to see what these defensive coordinators scheme in their mind's eye.
And I think, the way to think about both offense and defense is you really get a feel for what an offense wants to be and is on 1st down, because that's the proactive down for offense. That's where they can do what they want to do. Then you get a really good feel for what a defensive coordinator is and wants to do on 3rd down, because that's their down. So, when you look at what DeMeco Ryans does on 3rd down, he's really kind of fun to watch.
Well, Greg, I hate to end our time together so soon, but not only is the Zoom meeting getting ready to end, the radio show is getting ready to start.
That's okay. No, I thought that was a really good short conversation about the Texans, and they're going to be I wouldn't surprise me as if this offseason goes on, if people think that they're an AFC championship type team.
Absolutely.